Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for joining this Movo Academy session on advertising and financial promotions. So, hosted by our lovely Nick Watson. Over to you, Nick.
Morning all, thanks for joining us. So today we're going to be talking about advertising and financial promotions. I'm going to be talking for in the region of around about 45 minutes. So at the end of the session there will be some time for Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please save them to the end and we'll talk through anything that you need to raise or want to explore further. The session today should be eligible to be counted as structured CPD if you consider it as being relevant to your learning needs. The session today is to go alongside a updated advertising and financial promotions policy, which is now available on Buddy. So please do take the time to have a look at the new policy at some point. There is a bit more detail in the written policy that goes beyond what we're covering today because we're only going to do high level today. So at some point, please do take a look at the updated policy on Buddy and familiarise yourself with that. So today we're going to be talking about the what a financial promotion is, what the definition is, and what the main types of financial promotions are, as recognised by the FCA. We're then going to talk about what the FCA's expectations and requirements are for firms who are actively publishing financial promotions. And then we're going to summarise Movo's financial promotions policy, outlining what things we will look for when we are reviewing financial promotions and how you go about getting an approval on a financial promotion that's being issued. Just a short footnote, we're not going to be covering in any detail today the requirements in respect of advertising and promoting credit products or TV or radio advertising or companies' house requirements, because all of these are sort of fairly niche, fairly obscure, so to speak. They are covered by the policy to some extent, but we're not going to give it a great deal of emphasis today. So that's the backdrop. So moving into it, I guess the starting point with all of these things is always sort of outline what the definition of a financial promotion is. So that's up on screen, and it's effectively that it's an invitation or inducement to engage in investment activity that's communicated in the course of business. Now, you'll notice within that it makes reference to investment activity. Throughout the FCA handbook, they use extensive definitions. When you click into the definition of investment activity, it actually includes about 12 other activities beyond just purely investing, and one of those activities is insurance distribution activities. So whenever we see the word investment activity, it generally, for these purposes, incorporates insurance distribution as well. So the definition there includes the words invitation or inducement. The FCA handbook spends a bit of time debating what's meant by those because it's not a legally defined terms. And really where you end up on that is that it's a common sense application of what the word is of invitation or inducement. So effectively, it's any sort of communication that's sort of trying to persuade, influence people to interact with a regulated firm or to purchase an insurance policy or get quotes. Financial promotion must be external in nature, so it must be outward facing, so it's not just internal for your staff or Movo staff, and it must be a communication that's aimed at more than one external client, so it's not a one-to-one type thing necessarily. At a high level, there's different types of financial promotions. So the FCA's got three definitions effectively. The first one is what's called a real-time financial promotion. The second one is a non-real-time financial promotion. And then the third one, which isn't strictly a financial promotion, but we're going to cover it alongside them, is brand advertising. So to start off, we'll look at real-time financial promotions. So a real-time financial promotion is defined as a financial promotion which is made in the course of a personal visit, telephone conversation, or interactive dialogue. The key point there is the fact that it's an interactive dialogue. So effectively, for it to be a real-time financial promotion, there has to be the ability to interact with the person who's receiving the promotion. So that captures things like, for example, telemarketing calls, telemarketing campaigns. It potentially also captures things like webinars or marketing presentations if the attendees have the ability to interact with the presenter. And that, in some instances, the FCA outlines can capture things like, for example, online events, where people will interact via text message or immediately through the chat function and such like. Generally speaking, with real-time financial promotions, Movo has less of a role to play in terms of approving the promotion. Where there are slide materials and scripts, we would ask that you actually send those on to Movo for pre-approval by emailing compliance@movopartnership.co.uk. Outside of that, it will largely be a conversation piece, and there will be some ad hoc parts of the presentation as well. So in terms of sort of the ad hoc stuff, again, the expectation there is just that people will conduct themselves appropriately as a regulated person, approved person effectively. There's more detail on what that entails within our actual policy, but by and large, it's basically not being misleading, being fair, open, honest, all of that sort of stuff. So that's real-time financial promotions. The second category, which more of our activities like to fall into, is what's defined as non-real-time financial promotions, which is defined as a financial promotion that is not a real-time financial promotion, i.e. anything that doesn't fall into the definition of real-time then effectively falls into non-real-time. So it's anything else in effect. So this is a much broader definition, captures much wider array of types of promotion and advertising. So it captures, for example, websites. For those of you in any doubt, a website is 100% a financial promotion and needs to be going through approval processes and such like. It captures marketing emails. It captures social media posts like LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. It can also capture, in some instances, adverts in things like yellow pages, newspapers, etc. So if, for example, you publish something as a listing in the yellow pages or in the newspaper, if it's just purely factual, so name, address, telephone number, that wouldn't be a financial promotion. But if you then include a hook or an inducement or an invitation to make contact with you for services, we are great because type sort of scenario, then it becomes promotional in nature and falls within the definition of a non-real-time financial promotion. Likewise, profiles on websites such as Trustpilot, then advertising brochures, they're always going to be financial promotions. Marketing letters would also be financial promotion, likewise mail shots. And then if you are engaged or plan to engage in television adverts or radio adverts, that type of thing, again, they are likely to be non-real-time financial promotions. Now, with all types of financial promotion, the requirement is that they are supposed to be signed off by Movo's compliance team. So again, it's exactly the same process to get non-real-time financial promotions signed off. It's literally just an email to the compliance team. You'll then generally aim to give you feedback on the financial promotion within 5 working days. Outside of the real-time and non-real-time financial promotions, there is a third category, which is loosely a financial promotion, which is image advertising. So image advertising in itself is pretty much outside of the key requirements for financial promotions. Image advertising is very limited in nature, in that it is limited to activities which to raise brand awareness. So rather than sort of inviting, inducing, it's literally just sort of, here's our brand, and that's it. So that's doing things like, for example, getting umbrellas and printing your logo on it or your company name, sponsoring the local sports club and getting your name on their sports shirts or your logo, having your name or contact details appear on the hoardings around your local cricket club, that type of thing, where there's no element of come speak to us, because it's literally just, here's our brand name, here's our logo, here's our email address, telephone number, that type of thing. So by way of example, and this is a loose example because Carlsberg isn't financial, but for example, at the top, you'll see a variety of logos just published. Those would be image advertising and outside of the financial promotions rules, whereas the picture at the bottom, so the Danish Carlsberg one, that's actually sort of got promotional material in there saying come and drink our beer. Obviously not financial promotions, but it gives you an idea of sort of where the line's drawn between it being a promotional material versus purely image advertising. So in terms of the financial promotions, there's lots of rules and regulations. You'd be surprised to hear from the FCA around all of these types of financial promotions. So the main parts are that you've got the Perimeter Guidance Handbook number 8, which defines what is a financial promotion by and large. Then outside of that, the next thing that you'd look at is principles for business, which are the high-level overarching principles that apply to all regulated firms and everything that regulated firms do. So you've got principle 6, which is that a firm must pay due regard to the interests of its customers and treat them fairly, i.e. TCF. You've then got principle number 7, which is that a firm must pay due regard to the information needs of its clients and communicate information to them in a way which is clear, fair, and not misleading. And you've got principle 12, which came under consumer duty, which is that a firm must act to deliver good outcomes for retail customers. Within Movo, for consumer duty purposes, we've not really made any distinction between retail customers and commercial customers. So by and large, the expectation is that that would apply across the board, that any promotions that you look to do or look to issue should sort of, be able to be categorized as leading to good outcomes potentially. So outside of the principles for business, there's also a handbook called the General Provisions Handbook. Now within that, there isn't a great deal of content to be honest, but that's where we find the requirement that firms must include a regulatory disclosure on certain types of documents. So the regulatory disclosure that ARs of Movo need to include is firm name, so your name is an appointed representative of Movo Partnership Limited. Movo Partnership Limited is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority under the reference number 823503. So that's what we refer to as being the regulatory disclosure. That regulatory disclosure has to go on key pieces of literature. So there is an obligation that that disclosure goes on letterheads, needs to go on email footers, needs to go on websites, on the homepage at least, and ideally right the way through the website. Outside of that, it's largely sort of discretionary whether that statement is included. By and large, if it is like a promotional material that you're issuing, so for example, brochures, sales aids, leaflets type of thing, when we come to do the approval on it, we will generally ask that that statement goes in there if it's written medium stuff. So that's sort of the key high-level rules. There are more granular rules for insurance firms, which are contained within ICOBS 2.2. These aren't massively detailed, so there is only sort of a sprinkling of them. But the main rules under ICOBS 2.2 is that any sort of marketing materials, communications need to be clearly identifiable as such. So not sending out something and trying to fool people into interacting with you. Any financial promotions that are issued need to be formally approved within your firm, but also by Movo as firm principal. Any promotions issued needs to be clear, fair, not misleading. And if it isn't the case that that's met, then those promotions need to be withdrawn. The FCA does actually have an email address to contact them if you become aware of any financial promotions which you think are unhealthy and need to be withdrawn. Obviously, that's if you come across anything sort of fairly out there in the marketplace. Where you make any claims in any promotions which relate to pricing, cost, offering cheap premiums or being able to reduce premiums, that type of thing, in that instance, your financial promotion needs to give the outcome that is expected to be achieved by the majority of clients. So if you're saying that everybody's going to save money, it needs to be the case that at least 51% of people viewing that advert would be able to save money. If it's going to be less than the majority, so less than 48%, then you need to start providing more detailed information on what the percentage is like to be and what the scenario is where people will save money. So you have to qualify it in essence if it's going to be less than 51%. If the advert itself makes any references to sustainability or any green credentials such as ESG, then the actual characteristics of the product need to be consistent with the claims made. So you've got to make sure that any sort of advertising that makes any reference to ESG is in no way guilty or can be perceived as being guilty of greenwashing in any way, shape or form. Outside of ICOBS, so the specific rules for insurance, there is a chapter on financial promotions related to consumer credits or credit broking, which would be relevant if you wanted to start doing advertising which touched on premium finance. I would just say, though, we're not covering that in any detail because we don't expect firms to be doing much marketing based on premium finance. as that is purely an ancillary activity to the main activity of insurance. So we don't address those requirements in a great deal of detail within the policy. We're not covering it in any detail today, but you do need to be aware that if you start moving into sort of wanting to market your premium finance facilities and such like, there's a whole host of extra rules about how you present that type of thing. And it covers off, for example, how you present interest rates and things like that. So it adds quite a lot of extra technicality to a promotion if you start talking about any sort of commercial, any consumer credit products in detail. So as a rule of thumb, I'd generally suggest it's easiest to sort of not get drawn into that particularly. Outside of FCA rules, there are also Advertising Standards Agency Code of Conducts. There's two of those. One relates for non-broadcast promotional material. One relates to broadcast promotional material, so radio, television. There's quite a lot of content in those. So whilst they aren't actual FCA materials, they are more extensive than FCA materials in many ways. And much of what they say, you'd look at and actually say that's pretty much along the lines of what the FCA would take. So if you are heavily involved in advertising, marketing, it is worth having a read through those codes. Certainly for the initial preamble part that sort of outlines where the guidance that's available in various areas, and then looking at specifically the section that touches on financial services as well. It's all relevant, it's all useful stuff, and it's all part of the background and outlines where you would be likely to be challenged if you ever crossed any lines. There is a memorandum of understanding between the ASA and the FCA. So they do work together on things, and it has been the case that between them they've removed adverts of various types online. So one of the large equity release providers had adverts taken off the television last year because the two worked together and were unhappy with how things were being presented on a particular given advert. So Advertising Standards Agency stuff is well worth a look-see. I would also just note as well that there is a variety of FCA materials which are outside of the handbooks that are available. So for example, there is a finalised guidance document available talking about what their expectations are for use of social media and advertising via social media. That one's quite useful. There's also a document out there about prominence, which is about sort of how you weigh up headline terms versus more detail, so exclusions, limitations, things people need to be aware of to give balance. So those are out there, and again, useful reading for anybody that is heavily involved in advertising or financial promotions. The FCA, outside of those rules, the FCA does have some hot buttons, so to speak, and does have some categoric things that you are absolutely not able to do. So within the handbooks, it outlines that you can't use the FCA logo without receiving explicit prior approval from the FCA. So in effect, if you want to use their logo for anything, you have to go to them for permission, and by and large, they'll generally deny that unless you're an industry body. You're not allowed to hold your services out as being services or any products you offer as being FCA endorsed. It's fine to say that you are a AR of Movo and that Movo is authorised and regulated by the FCA. But you've got to stop short of saying that you've got any form of FCA endorsement, as the FCA would view that as being misleading and offering additional reassurances that aren't actually valid potentially. Same point applies in respect of unregulated activities. I don't think this is going to be true for many, if any, of Movo firms, but if you do carry out any activities that are unregulated, then in any promotional materials that you issue, you need to be really clear on which activities are regulated and which aren't. And again, it's the same point that the FCA doesn't want anybody to be misled into thinking that there's greater regulatory protections available than is in fact the case. So no misleading in there. So those are the sort of high-level FCA requirements. Adding a bit more flesh to the bone on that, when we review a financial promotion at Movo, there are various criteria that we will look at and consider when we're assessing a financial promotion. So just to give you a brief walk through what we look at when we're approving financial promotions. So the first point that would be that for written communications, so brochures, emails, that type of thing, it needs to include the regulatory disclosure in full. Any promotion needs to be clear, fair, not misleading, so reiteration of the requirement from the principles for business. We need to be confident that when we're looking at anything that's in writing, that it's likely to be understood by its target audience. So we need to understand who it's actually going to be targeted at, what products you're looking to offer through that, and like just literally try and assess whether or not it'll be understood by your average Joe layperson effectively. Any claims that are made in your promotional materials need to be capable of being substantiated. So, for example, if you're claiming to have received any awards, any plaudits, if you're making any claims about cost, all of that type of stuff needs to be substantiated and evidenceable. Likewise, if you are moving into talking about cost of insurance and being able to make savings, then again, that point from the FCA, about 51% or more need to receive that particular saving. Otherwise, you need to qualify it more explicitly. Again, I generally suggest that it's preferable to avoid discussing pricing if you can, because again, it sort of wraps you up in additional layers of technicality, so to speak, which can take your promotion from being nice, glossy looking into having sort of, extra wording going in that sort of makes it less attractive because it has to balance out the pricing claims being made. Everything needs to be factually accurate. So everything that is there, if you're talking about, for example, products, services, what a policy covers, all of that needs to be factually accurate and needs to give a balanced picture. So you can't misrepresent something as being all singing, all dancing. If there's obvious exclusions, limitations, or qualifications that are needed, that should be in the promotion as well, to make sure that, again, that we're not leading people up the garden path and setting unrealistic expectations from the product or from your services as well, potentially. That means that there is, coming back to that point about prominence, so it means that prominence needs to be given to risk warnings, exclusions, limitations. The FCA's published guidance on that, it wasn't specific to general insurance. It was aimed mainly at investments and mortgages, and they said the same points applies to insurance, but they didn't give us examples. But what that does mean is that if, for example, you've got a headline which on page 1 says in 72-point text, come to us, we are great, we'll save you a fortune. Any sort of risk warnings, exclusions, limitations, or qualifications that sort of add context to that to balance it out can't be on the back page in size 6 font underneath all of the boxes. It needs to be sort of prominent enough so that anybody reading that will actually see the thing in the full and get a balanced picture in the round. Plain English. So we're going to be talking about plain English in a little bit more detail in a few moments, but again, we'll be looking to assess whether or not the actual communication is understandable, likely to be understood by the target market, which means making minimal use of jargon, so as little use of technical jargon as possible. Where any jargon is unavoidable, making sure it's explained appropriately in a way that a layman will be able to follow effectively. We do sometimes see promotions where it's unclear whether the promotion is being issued by an insurance broker or the insurer. That needs to be really clear. So can't publish anything that has any ambiguity about that. We need to be really clear that we're the broker, not the insurer. Again, because the FCA would view that as being misleading about the depth of our pockets, basically, if we were claiming to be an insurer and the level of our regulation. Defamatory language. So you can provide opinion within financial promotions. Again, we generally prefer that opinion isn't included if possible, because opinion becomes quite grey. But if you do want to insert opinion in there of any description, they need to be really comfortable and careful to make sure that it's in no way defamatory and that it's not making unfounded claims or anything that can't be substantiated. It's quite a lot of care needed where opinion is provided to avoid that. Opinion can actually get you sued quite easily. It's not just a regulatory point, it's sort of what you say about competitors and so on. All financial promotions need to be standalone compliant, which basically means that they need to meet all of the requirements for the FCA and Advertising Standards Agency within that one promotion itself. So you can't sort of advertise features and benefits and then say, go and look at our website for details of the risks of a product or to find out details of what isn't included. It needs to be sort of a balanced promotion that's standalone compliant. That doesn't mean you need 30 pages of risk warnings and such like, but it just means it needs to be fairly balanced and not give any sort of misleading views of things. Where images are used in any promotion, they need to be appropriate. I'll let you make your own jokes upon that one. But in all seriousness, the FCA has been quite fastidious on that. So to firm I've worked at before, they were advertising mortgages, and they had an advert that was basically saying that come to us, 90% of people that apply to us managed to get mortgages through us. And the image that was attached to that advert was actually a beach shack on a sunny beach somewhere like Hawaii or something. And the FCA asked for that promotion to be removed because they said that the image was not consistent and appropriate for the communication. And the reason being they were saying that that image inferred that somebody would be able to get a mortgage on a beach shack based on a sunny beach in somewhere, whereas the lender was purely lending only in the UK. So they said it's inappropriate. So just to give you a flavour of how fastidious on that point the FCA has been known to be. Any promotions need to be suitable in that they won't sort of pose any increased risk of harms to vulnerable customers. So they can't be seeking to play on people's vulnerability if they're in a vulnerable situation. They can't be seeking to exploit behavioural biases. And they can't be sort of, they need to be sort of clear and suitable for pretty much everybody out there in effect. When we are reviewing a financial promotion, we will be looking at it with a very in the round, basically, with very broad criteria. So one of the things that we will look at as a catch-all, so to speak, is whether or not we think that the promotion itself has any potential to not lead to good consumer outcomes, i.e. whether it's misleading in any way, shape or form, whether it's unclear. And that can be through including text that shouldn't be in there. That can also be through omitting things that need to be said to balance things out and make sure it's actually got a balanced commentary in there. Where the promotional material includes anything that's likely to limit its shelf life, our approval may come with this is approved for use for 1 year, and at the end of the 1 year, or whatever the term may be, you'd need to come back to us to get it reapproved, or you'd need to sort of stop using that promotional material. That will typically be the case where within the promotional material, you're referencing any recent events, any upcoming events, or if you're sort of saying anything that ties in with tax years. Outside of that, by and large, for insurance purposes, most financial promotions will be suitable to be used for an extended period of time. So generally speaking, outside of ones where there is a limited shelf life that we can see, we'll generally approve things for use whilst you're a Movo AR. We will periodically re-review that in light of looking back to logs and just seeing if there's anything that we don't think should be live because it's historic in nature. But by and large, unless it's got a limited shelf life, we'll just sort of let it run on. We'll also look to consider if the advert itself is aimed at clients who are resident and domiciled in the UK. Again, just for the purpose of trying to make sure that we avoid any inappropriate cross-border activity unintentionally. And we'll also give consideration to the broad point about whether or not the promotion itself does enable informed decision making. And when we say informed decision making, that's going to depend on what you're actually inviting people to do. So if, for example, you're asking somebody to come to you to actually seek advice, then the informed decision making element is it enabling them to contact you? If you're saying go online and buy something directly, then obviously the test for informed decision making is different because you're asking for them to take a different action in the background. So those are the types of questions that we will ask and considerations we will have whenever we review any type of financial promotion. That captures anything at all. So whether it's written, whether it's a real-time, non-real-time, whether it's a website, all of those considerations are going to be applicable to anything that comes across the desk of our compliance team effectively. There would be additional considerations for specific types of financial promotion. I'm going to touch on some of those in a few minutes. Just harking back to consumer duty. So one of the themes of consumer duty was that the FCA want to see firms taking a great deal of care about making sure that their communications are tailored and sufficiently clear and are likely to be understood by their target market. So one of the things that they said within a lot of their materials was that firms should test their communications. They left a lot of wiggle room as to what testing actually constitutes. So it didn't sort of mandate or force firms to go ahead and sort of get consumer focus groups together and such like that. though they do expect that from much larger firms, sort of, like your large insurers like Aviva and so on, they will be doing that. But for firms like a insurance intermediary, there are still steps that are helpful to take, which we would encourage you to do in the background. So, for example, testing your promotional material through what we call granny testing, which basically means that you're getting somebody who is non-financially services literate, so somebody who's not in the insurance industry, to read through your promotional material paragraph by paragraph, tell you what they think that material actually means. And the benefit of that is that you'll get direct feedback as to what they're struggling to follow, what they think doesn't read particularly well, what they're struggling to make sense of. And off the back of that, you can make amends to make it really easy for people to read and interact with, leading to a high quality promotional material, communications material. So we summarize that internally as what we call granny testing, but obviously it doesn't have to be granny, anyone who's not financial services literate. So that can be a partner, family member, staff member, receptionist, grab the cleaner, for want of a better word. But if you do something like granny testing, I would just say on that, it's worth documenting that you've done it, what the outcome was, and keeping the old version of the document and then the amended version, just to really sort of be able to say that you can evidence that you've done a degree of testing on your literature. Because from an FCA point of view, you'd get a big thumbs up on the basis that you've done some testing and you've acted off the back of it. Another couple of things that we would point you towards and suggest are actually good materials and helpful is there is a website called the Campaign for Plain English. On that website, there is a library of materials that they have, which we think are excellent. So, for example, there's a guide to using plain English on there, which talks about how to write in a way that's easy to read. It talks about how to sort of use punctuation, apostrophes, all of that sort of stuff, and gives you some sort of clear benchmarks to work to, how to use active language versus passive language to make things readable. So it's really good materials on there. So I'd point people towards that and say that's well worth having a read of if you're in the process of drafting any marketing materials. There's a variety of things on there. They've got drivel defense. They've got documents that suggest alternative terms to financial jargon. There's a wide array of stuff on there. So I would just suggest going and having a poke around and having a read through. It really is some good stuff on there. Likewise, there's a firm out there called Fairer Finance who, again, sort of view themselves as specialising in helping with consumer duty requirements. So they will help you with marketing campaigns, help you draft things in a way that's very nice and clear. They'll also arrange consumer focused research groups if you need them. So again, just a general resource or a firm out there that can actually help with this type of thing. What I would just say is in respect of those two providers, Movo's got no financial relationship with them whatsoever. We don't own shares. We don't earn anything from them. I am literally just referencing them because we know that they're out there and that what they do we think is very good. There are other providers out there that do similar types of things, I dare say, but they're the ones that we're aware of. So hence I'm just giving them a little bit of a plug here today. Outside of that, there is also the functionality to use Microsoft Word. So within Microsoft Word, there is a editor function. So if you go across to the review tab at the top of the screen, you'll then get a separate menu pops up. Within that menu on the left-hand side, you can see you've got an editor on the far left. You open up the editor function and it'll then give you feedback on spelling errors, grammar, so helping condense your grammar to being more user-friendly. And there's also an insights function. So if you scroll down within the editor, there's an insights function, which will then give you feedback on how easy or hard it is to read your document. And it'll give you some very useful statistics as well, such as what the average words per sentence is, number of sentences per paragraph. And the idea is, by and large, that you want to keep the number of words in a sentence down as low as possible, so about 11 on average. You want to keep paragraphs relatively short, so fairly easy to read on the eye without sort of inducing eye strain, such like. And within sentences, for example, you try and only have one idea in each sentence without sort of having to change direction within each sentence using commas and such like, because it just makes it harder to read and adds complexity, particularly if you're using financial jargon in there. What I would say is that anything that's sort of financial services orientated probably isn't going to be the easiest thing to make terribly readable, because of what we're covering is technical content and there will inherently be some degree of jargon in there. But just using that functionality to try and make things as easy to read as possible again, is really helpful from a point of view. And even being able to say that you've just applied that functionality again, it is a positive step in terms of a degree of testing of what you've done. And then finally, the other one that we're aware of that's commonly used is Grammarly. So you can use that as an internet browser sort of plugin. You can literally put text into that and it'll tell you how easy it is to read and give you alternative suggestions and such like, so much like Microsoft Word in effect. So all of those are great things to be doing if you're sort of doing anything that's sort of consumer facing, customer facing, just to try and help make sure that you've sort of took the edge off it and made it as easy as possible to read and for people to interact with you ideally. When we do review your financial promotions, we will give consideration to some of these points. What I would say is that we will literally, so we offer some degree of testing, but I would say is we won't rewrite things for you greatly. We will literally go back to, is it clear enough? Does it actually explain jargon clearly enough? We won't actually spend a lot of time making sure the grammar's perfect and all the rest of it as you'd do. We expect that to sort of sit within the firm itself to actually look at making it easy to read and all the rest of it. We will only sort of highlight where we think there's actually something we'd view as a problem, rather than sort of getting it to where we'd consider optimal when we review it potentially. So yeah, just to flag that. In terms of websites, social media, so websites are a form of financial promotion, 100%. So quite often we find that firms don't realise that that's a financial promotion. It absolutely is. So websites need to be approved by the compliance team. And if you're looking to make changes to your website, that again needs to be approved by Movo's compliance team. So send in the drafts to the email address that we mentioned earlier, and generally we'll look at that and give you feedback. Again, the actual level of review that we do is around sort of identifying if we think there's anything that would be problematic, as opposed to sort of making sure everything's framed and discussed optimally the way I would personally say it. We do very much within these things want to let firms have their own voice and let things be phrased the way you would. But again, I would just suggest, taking care to make sure it is as easy to read as possible, taking into account all the guidance we've just sort of run through. Social media posts. So again, on this one, social media posts are 100% a financial promotion in most instances, unless it falls within the definition of image advertising that we touched on at the very start. So for example, if you're posting things on LinkedIn, trying to induce or invite people to interact with your firm, that is likely to be financial promotional material and should have been pre-approved by Movo's compliance team. If you're putting stuff on Twitter or X, as it now is, or whatever they call it, that is promotional material. Again, needs to be pre-approved by Movo's compliance team. YouTube videos, that would need to be approved by Movo's compliance team. There we would want to see the slide and the script in advance effectively, because that's moving, well, it's still non-real time to be fair. So yes, we'd want to see the slides and the script for that. Facebook, Meta, Instagram, TikTok, all of those financial promotions need pre-approval. Also worth being aware that if you participate in discussion forums like Reddit or whatever, if you chime in and become part of the discussion on that, depending on what you say, again, that could become potentially a financial promotion. So again, worth just being aware of and having some thought about that before you chime in on those sort of websites. And be careful if you are going to do that to make sure that it doesn't sort of become a financial promotion. So social media moves us on to influencers. Oh, sorry, there's one further point on social media I should add, which is that when you are doing anything on social media, you should take a great deal of care to make sure that that promotion is actually standalone compliant. And the reason being, one of the big concerns with social media posts is that that post can be reposted. So once you've posted it, you've generally got limited control over who then sees it, where it goes, and such like. So the part that you have got control of, which is your part, needs to be standalone compliant. It needs to include everything within that particular post that anybody needs to see. So you can't sort of put stuff in the post that's doing the marketing piece and then say for anything that relates to pricing, to qualify the pricing, you've then got to click on a link and go elsewhere. It's all got to be in your initial post. So you've got complete control over it. In respect of influence, we would just suggest avoid them like the plague. Anybody who is acting as an influencer or a financial influencer, there's a high likelihood that they are carrying out regulated activities, without holding the required regulatory permissions. The FCA has had a little bit of a clampdown on this, so they've took various people to court last year on this, and it is an area where the FCA sort of said within the business plan that they are going to be actively policing it. Somebody who's acting as a influencer will generally be looking to make money because they will be generating clicks, and they may have adverts within their videos and such like and be getting income from that. There have been instances where they've been paid to actually advertise on behalf of particular providers and such like. Again, we would just say don't get involved. Don't get involved with influencers whatsoever, because it's a world of pain waiting for us there if we get into that. Even if you do look to enter into a formal agreement with somebody, it's worth noting that what an influencer does on TikTok and whatnot is likely to go beyond what an introducer or an introducer appointed representative can do. So outside of the formal agreement that you have. So an introducer or an introducer appointed representative can display promotional material. They can verbally sort of give factual detail and pass people on to you, but very limited factual detail. They're not an advertising mechanism. So when it comes to influencers, just be aware that's an area where you need to step away from. As we outline at the bottom of that slide, it's generally considered unlawful for a person to actually issue financial promotions unless they're part of a regulated firm themselves, or it is an approved regulation issued by a regulated firm. Generally speaking, the only circumstances where you can approve a promotional material to be used outside of your firm would be as if you have a registered introducer or introducer appointed representative. We've signed off on the relationship, and we've also signed off on the materials as well. Outside of that, you really need to look at avoiding getting involved in the introducer space. So finally, just moving on briefly to marketing consents. This is a really complex area. Lots of nuances apply to it. So I'm not going to be covering this in anything like the depth that we could do. This could be a hour-long webinar in its own right to explore the way marketing consents work. By and large, the rule of thumb for Movo and Movo ARs is that you should have a consent to carry out marketing before you carry out any marketing activities. That's the rule of thumb. That's sort of Movo's stance. That's where we expect the position to be. In terms of the rules around consents, the position gets really complicated. There are lots of nuances outside of that. So there are circumstances where it is legally permissible to market without actually having consent, but it is somewhat of a minefield. It's quite difficult to actually understand where the land lies. So by and large, within Movo, we say get the consents. So the issues of consent for marketing is covered by UK GDPR, the Data Protection Act 2018, and the Privacy and Electronic Communications regulations. Within those regulations, there's lots of variables around consents, which sort of touches on what the marketing channel will be. So the point on consent differs if you're going to send things via email to if you send it by post, who you're actually marketing to. So again, the position is very different if you're marketing to somebody who is an identifiable person to if you're marketing to a limited company just by sending something to a hello@Movo partnership inbox. If you are sending something to an identifiable email address of a person like Nick Watson at Movo, then in that instance, that becomes something that falls back into scope of GDPR because that email address identifies a particular person. So it's really quite a complex area. And the regulations aren't just about sort of, approaching people, but it's about how you actually manage the data that you hold in respect of them as well, because that's actually the GDPR elements. There's quite a lot of complexity in this space. Would just flag in this area that in terms of marketing consents, the liability for that largely sits with you as the AR yourself. So you've all got your own ICO licenses and directly accountable to ICO for GDPR and PECR compliance. As your firm principal and FCA entity, we obviously do provide guidance on this, and we'll challenge things when we're aware that there's potential issues. But by and large, you need to be aware there that you do have some responsibility yourself to the regulatory bodies in that area. Final point on the consents is that in terms of renewals, we don't consider approaching people to confirm that they need to renew something as being a financial promotion. So you don't need to approach us for permission every time you want to go out to somebody say something's due to renew. We consider that to be part of a sales process effectively, and almost sort of I won't say it's actually relationship management, but it's effectively part starting a sales process. And it is specific to one client only. So again, it's not particularly a marketing exercise. It is the way we would sort of consider that one. So we think that's a point where there is some shades of grey about it. It could be argued, but we think the common sense interpretation there is that there's no need to actually come and treat that as a financial promotion as such if you're approaching somebody directly. So final point is the ICO and regulatory regulations do accept and identify that there is a difference between marketing and servicing. So the GDPR and ICO has various things in there that touches on servicing. So you don't need any consents to send servicing communications such as emails, billing, chasing people for premiums, to let them know of changes of terms to service, to confirm that they've got an appointment with you on XYZ date. All of that sort of stuff falls within servicing, so no consents in any of that whatsoever. However, when you send out something that is classed as servicing, it cannot include any promotional content. If it includes any promotional content, any call to action to come and speak to us to do XYZ, then in that instance it becomes promotional in nature. The whole thing becomes promotional in nature, and effectively in that instance you then need to treat it as a financial promotion and seek approval before you issue that. So that's a run through, I think, pretty much all of the formal content I've got. So we've covered off what a financial promotion is and what the main types of financial promotions are, i.e. real-time financial promotion, non-real-time financial promotion, and advertising, brand advertising. We've talked about the FCA's key requirements for publishing financial promotions, i.e. the requirements under Principles for Businesses, the requirements under ICOBS 2.2. We've also spoken about the Advertising Standard Agency codes, which are also relevant and have teeth. And we've also touched on what Movo's requirements are and what we consider when we're approving financial promotions under our financial promotions policy. And we've also spoken about the process and what you need to do if you want to receive sign off of any financial promotions that you want to issue. So that brings to a close the formal part of today's presentation. So that brings to an end the slides. So at this point, probably if I hand over to Julie and ask if there are any questions that we want to cover off.
There are some questions. I'll just go through the chat first and then I'll come to you, Colin, because I know you've raised your hand. So firstly, Lucy, could we say we offer a range of payment options, including monthly payments?
Yes, and that doesn't get you drawn into all of the sort of extra layers of regulatory spiel that we need to give, so that's fine. Yeah.
Social media, based on the volume of posts I have previously worked within a framework, does Movo have to sign off every post? Would this include replies to posts?
Not sure what's meant by the replies to post point, but yes, fundamentally we ask to approve all financial promotions. So social media posts, we need to sign those off because that is actually a financial promotion. If you know that you're going to be doing a campaign of those, you can send it through in bulk. So if you're going to be issuing XYZ number over the next 3 months, you can send those all in one go if you need to, and we'll work through that. In terms of replies to posts, so if there's a discussion that's ongoing off the back of it, so for example, if you posted something on LinkedIn and somebody starts chatting to you through LinkedIn, I'd probably say on that one that we wouldn't necessarily want to sort of see every proposed response you're going to give before you give it on that, because that feels like it's actually getting quite intrusive. But again, just generally apply the principles that we've outlined within today's presentation and make sure that what you're saying is sensible as a sensible direct response.
Excellent. On leaflets and websites, along with the Movo disclosure, do we also need to include on the bottom the business limited company name and number?
So I'd suggest on that one that that's probably a sensible move. So that's a company's house requirement, which applies to key stationery. Again, they mandate that it's only sort of key stationery. So it's letterheads mainly, websites, invoices, compliment slip. They're largely silent, I think, about promotional material, but by and large, yes, we'd say that that's a sensible thing to include on anything that's sort of letterheaded, got logos on and such like.
Excellent. If I post in a personal capacity, am I still subject to FCA guidelines?
Yes, absolutely. Because if in that instance you are promoting the services or products of your firm, you are issuing a financial promotion. So on that one, I'm less worried about the influencer type stuff because you are obviously a person in a regulated firm acting on behalf of your firm. So not greatly worried about that side of things. But yeah, it is absolutely still a financial promotion being issued on behalf of your firm.
Would it be okay to use Chat GPT to test communications?
Can't say I've actually used it because you need, I believe you generally need a subscription to use it much, but by and large, yes, I think that's fine because again, the whole point with that is it'll help you sort of reframe it and all the rest of it. I have seen discussions on various webinars around ChatGPT where they've outlined that that's a potential function for it. So I don't know how good or bad it is personally, but again, it's exactly the same principle that you're trying to use technology to refine your process. So yes, absolutely, fire away.
If you post on social media simply to advise you're an insurance broker, is that classed as a financial promotion?
Ooh. Depends. So this is the one where it's a little bit grey because it could be image advertising. So if you're literally putting a post on LinkedIn, for argument's sake, I'm going to go back to LinkedIn a lot because I know we use LinkedIn or know a lot of firms use LinkedIn. If you literally posted something on there that was literally just your firm's name, contact number, email address, that would be image advertising because you're not actually including anything that's sort of inducing or inciting. So you're not taking any extra step to do anything that's promotional, as we classify it. But if you then start including text in there which says we're really good at insurance, we've got lots of insurers available, we've got a really great process, come speak to us, that becomes a financial promotion because you've moved away from being image advertising into promoting.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I know we've got hands up with Colin and Lucy. So if we go to Colin first, do you want to unmute, Colin?
Yeah, just done it. Hello, Nick. Colin Mayer at Bowling Underwriting.
Hello.
Just promotions. What about charity? Just for argument's sake, put a scenario. I'll give £1 for every policy that you take out with us to a certain charity.
Yeah, okay. So there are rules. That's a good one. So there are rules for charities advertising in terms of bits and pieces for us. So you could actually say that within your promotions. I don't think that's particularly contentious. What I would suggest is that within that, you'd probably need to include the reference number for the charity itself so people can validate who you're actually saying you're going to give the money to.
Yep.
When we're reviewing that promotion, we would also carry out some due diligence to make sure that that's actually an existing charity, that we're not getting tied up into anything. But I don't think there's any sort of great issues with that. I just said it needs to be quite clear that you're doing that. And obviously that can't be misleading. So if you're saying that, it needs to be across the board on that particular type of policy. And it just needs to be clear which charity you're actually giving it to. I don't think there's a great deal beyond that. We would look at that one probably a bit more closely when we come to sign it off, but I don't think there's a great deal extra that would need to go in beyond that, really.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Lucy.
Thank you. I've got a few, so I'll keep them quick. I'm assuming if we post a testimonial from a client on social media, Google reviews, that sort of thing, that's okay and doesn't need sign off.
So testimonial from a client, I would probably say on that one, again, that becomes quite grey. It's a really good question, that one. Haven't actually considered that point. I'd take that as being, there is the argument it's promotional and it's sort of inducing people to come across as in it's an advert. I'd probably suggest on that one that we don't need to actually have individual testimonials coming in for approval. What I would say is at the point where you start actually using a profile to start adding testimonials, it becomes promotional in nature, I'd probably say. So I'd probably suggest it's worth looking at the overall post, i.e. your Trustpilot entry. And then once you're actually getting people posting on it, we won't need to approve those individual posts.
Thank you. And then, sorry, next, I'll keep them as quick as I can. Can we say we've saved a particular client X amount of money, or is that moving into saying that we'll save all clients money?
Oh, that's a really good question again. So on that one, what you would need to do is, I'd probably steer away from saying that, to be honest. I'd probably steer away from saying that in an advert, and the reason being that becomes really difficult because on that one you can say that there's instances where you've done it. I'm thinking there that the point about it sets an expectation, and again the point would be that if there's debate or doubt about whether or not that expectation is going to be met, how do you actually qualify that statement? If it's the case that you can say in 50%, 51% of cases we achieve a saving of XYZ, or we've saved, then yes, but it needs to be the point that anything that you say along those lines, you need to be able to sort of evidence, quantify, and back up basically. So
Okay,
you're
and
moving there
then
into trickier territory.
and last two are kind of linked, I think. If I'm posting on social media something like, oh, our business is 6 years old, or here I am at a business networking event, or here I am doing, getting to know me as a person rather than particularly about the product, assume those don't need signing off.
So that type of thing, we've been here 6 years, I've been in the industry 20 years. I'd probably say I'd be happy to treat that as being image advertising rather than promotional material. Again, it is a little bit grey because you're sort of saying we're great because, to some extent, but provided it's not framed as come and talk to us because it's literally sort of just about me, then yeah, I think again that probably falls within the definition of not being a formal financial promotion.
Okay, and last one, sorry. If people are posting on business groups, can someone help me with my insurance? And we comment underneath to say, yes, we can help with that. Please contact us. Here's our website details for contact details. That needs to be something that's posted like within a few minutes of them asking a thing. Would that need sign off or?
So yeah, strictly speaking, that is a financial promotion because you're actually saying I'm inviting you and inducing you to come and interact with us. So strictly speaking, that is a financial promotion. So yes, that should be coming through the formal sign-off process.
Okay, so there's no point us responding to those then, because if we waited 5 days for something to be signed off, that person will already have had their problem solved.
So on that one, if it's through the forum, then strictly speaking, that is a financial promotion. The question I'd probably ask there is there any other means of actually making contact with that individual which wouldn't be a financial promotion? So, person to person phone call, that type of thing potentially.
It's usually discouraged to directly message someone on business networking groups. You're encouraged to comment below a question and not to direct message someone unless they've asked for you to do so.
Okay. What I'd probably suggest for that sort of scenario is if you are active in that space, my suggestion would be that it's probably worth you actually drafting some template text. So giving us an indication of what you actually want to say when it crops up, send that in. We'll approve it and give a fairly blanket approval to use that for that type of query. So give us a scenario and some sample wording. So you might want 2 or 3 different versions of the wording, and we'll basically approve that and say fundamentally you're good to go with those scenarios.
So copy and paste as an answer sort of thing.
Pretty much, yeah. So it's a blanket type approval effectively.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thanks, Lucy. Before I go to the other hands up that we've got another question, but I know one of these people's raised his hand as well. So if I post on LinkedIn or social media to advise my target clients that I am attending event ABC on such a date and will be presenting, should we have sign off for this? Is that classed a financial promotion?
Yes, I would say it is because you're inviting them to interact with you and trying to drive them to take action to interact with you. So yes, I'd view that as being a financial promotion.
Along with the actual presentation that you are doing on the day, that would have to be signed off because it would be deemed a financial promotion, wouldn't it, Nick?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, before I go to final couple of hands raising, I'm going to throw something in quickly. If you've got existing clients and you decide to have touch points throughout the year where you reach out to them, check everything's okay, but in that you're intending to promote other products that they haven't got, is that deemed as servicing or is that deemed as a financial promotion?
I think the likelihood on that would be that that's actually promoting because it's part of it is servicing, but the rules on servicing are that whenever you do servicing, if you then mix it in with any promotional element, that promotional element then means that it becomes a financial promotion. So it becomes promotional in nature.
So that means even when you're discussing an existing renewal, if there are other covers that you should recommend along with that renewal, they could be deemed as financial promotions, couldn't they?
Yeah,
Rather than gap analysis.
What I would say is I think here that there is, so technically there is an argument that that becomes financial promotion because you're blurring servicing with financial promotions. The one thing I would say though is that if we're only interacting with one specific customer at a time and just having a very bespoke niche conversation about what their potential needs are, then under the commentary about financial promotions, it tends to be something that's going to be reused again and again and not just targeted in one particular conversation, then in that instance, I think that you broadly say that that's actually part of our overall services and not particularly a financial promotion per se that needs sign off. I think that you can navigate that.
Okay, cool. We'll go to the hands up and then we'll come back to the chat. My word, it's busy this morning. So, Andrew, Lean.
Hi, I just wanted to check. So I use a third-party marketing person that does marketing for me. They generate posts, and I've always worked within a framework that as long as we're not being product specific, so we're not going into features of a product, because then you'd need also to go into the exclusions of the product, and we're not giving any absolutes like we will save your money or we will be able to cover you. As long as we're talking in mays and maybes and being very general, then within that framework, that's quite safe.
Yeah, so what you've said to me there, that sounds like a fairly vanilla way to do your advertising and financial promotions.
Yeah.
Nothing you've said there sort of points to extra layers of regulatory rules or ICOBS rules kicking in. So yes, in terms of your approach there, that sounds like it's quite safe. What I would say is third parties drafting materials for you, if they're going to be issued on your behalf or by you with their support, those still need to come through us for final approval. But what you're actually saying there about sort of how you're structuring it is all good, safe practice that's not likely to be contentious.
Yeah, she sends me the drafts in ahead of time, and I just go through and change anything that looks a bit like an absolute or gets into too much detail. But do you want all of those sent in to you now rather than working within that framework?
So yes, all of those, when you go to publish those, they should actually be going through our compliance team for approval. Again, if you know you're going to be doing a program of them over the next coming months, you can send in a batch and they can approve a batch, however you want to do it. But yes, in essence, we do need to have oversight of anything that's getting published.
Okay, all right, that's a change for me.
Okay, Matthew Undengi. He's raised his hand, but he's on mute. You're on mute, Matthew. Okay. Well, we'll come back to the chat then. Are you?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, I'm there.
Oh, you're okay. Far away.
I was looking for the unmute button.
That's fine.
Thank you, Nick, for the presentation, and thank you, Julie. So, just a very quick one. In my case, I've got some of my clients. They are on a WhatsApp group that I was actually invited on that platform. It's a healthcare and social providers network. So there are over 1,000 members there. And there are other businesses who also, their days of trading. They call it days of trading, like every Monday and Thursday. So all I simply do is I put my leaflet, which has been approved already by compliance. So in that case, I don't have to always come back to you every time, isn't it? Or
so if you're using materials that we've approved previously and just reposting those, you don't need to come back to us for a fresh approval on it, provided the way that you're using is in line with how it was envisaged to begin with. Then yeah, there's no problem with that. You just keep reusing it.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Any more on that? Right. Okay. Back to the chat. if you're talking to a property owner and you mention rebuild cost assessment service, that's for a building valuation, is that a financial promotion?
Ooh, that's a great question, because I'm not sure if that is actually that service or that product. I'm not sure if that even actually falls within the regulatory perimeter.
I don't think it does, because it is a service that they buy into. It's for to do a valuation, but there is a good value of offering it to make sure the sum insured is adequate before you do the renewal or new business. So
I think on that one, I would go with the view that it's not, on the basis that I don't think it's actually something that falls within the regulatory perimeter. That one's quite grey. I'm less cocky on that one because I've not looked at that before. That's one I might take away and have a look at.
okay, excellent. Somebody did ask who you send any of your material to get signed off, and Pete has put that in the chat. So it's compliance@movopartnership.co.uk. And we've got a final one in the chat. Are you happy to pre-approve batches on our marketing firm's platform? I presume, as you've said, you're happy to have batches of them and then do it that way.
Yep, happy to apply approve batches. No problem with that.
And Michaela's reference FG24/1 finalised guidance on financial promotions on social media might be helpful for those using third-party marketing to send on.
Yeah, absolutely. It is sort of quite high level. So what we've touched on today pretty much covers what's in there. But yeah, absolutely. That's some of the regulatory backdrops. So if you are working with third parties, it would be helpful to you if they're at least aware of some of that sort of stuff in the background.
Okay, and Lucy, do you want to just unmute and then raise? Because clearly what I asked before about the pre-approved batches on your marketing firm's platform isn't quite what you meant me to ask.
Thank you. So we're just about to instruct the marketing firm, and I've said to them that marketing will need to be pre-approved. They've said that they can populate 1 or 2 months in advance, and it will be on their own platform, and they can give access to their platform for you to review and sign off, as opposed to emailing over all of the text.
No, we would actually want a copy of that, to be honest. We'd either need a screenshot or a printout. And the reason being, we have to keep records of any promotions we approve in the background with all of this stuff. So the responsibility for signing stuff off sort of sits with Movo by and large, because we're where the FCA would approach if they looked at anything online and had a concern. So yeah, we would actually need an internal record on that. So we'd need to be able to get a PDF of some sort, something that we could actually save for our records in the background.
I think it would be quite.
You.
I think it'd be quite difficult, wouldn't it, Nick, for us to have, because Lucy, there could be quite a few people on here that use similar things, and suddenly we'd have logins to view platforms all over the place, and it would just be impossible to monitor and manage, really.
Yeah.
One final question. You would need a Word document, not a link to a Google Doc. I don't think it really matters how it comes, as long as we can see the content and how it's going to look, really.
Yeah, would prefer a Word document that, so for us to actually be able to access, to actually see what's going to be actually published. So we, again, from the point of view of we need to keep records on this stuff. So if we get a hyperlink to something somewhere else, it leaves us with the question of how we sort of keep a record of that. So yeah, preferably a Word document is probably the preferred route from our point of view.
Excellent.
And I'd say Word document rather than PDF if possible, because if we want to mark it up or give feedback, we'll often do that directly on the document.
Thank you, Nick. Has anybody else got any more questions? Excellent. Well, we will finish for today. I'll let Nick cancel or stop the recording, but thanks everybody for joining. And the recording will be up on Buddy as soon as we can get it on, along with the presentation. But thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.